Hey there, welcome back. Today we're diving deep into something I bet you think about a lot. How kids develop a sense of control.
hmm
And you know what we as parents can do about it? Our guide for this deep dive is The Self-Driven Child
Okay.
by William Stixrud and Ned Johnson. So we're going to pull out like the juiciest bits,
hmm
and see how we can apply those to raising
Yeah.
awesome, self-motivated kids that we
Yes.
all dream of.
It's a fantastic book, really. It's
Yeah.
got that perfect mix of solid research
Right.
and actionable advice,
Ah.
which is what makes it so useful, right?
And the book doesn't sugarcoat things. It kicks off with this pretty intense statement. Without a healthy sense of control, kids are at high risk
Yeah.
of becoming anxious, struggling with anger,
hmm
or even self-destructive.
Wow.
Kind of makes you sit up and pay attention, huh?
It does, and that's because it speaks to something really fundamental about how our brains work, especially when we're young. Think about it.
Yeah.
When you feel like you have zero control over your life, it's incredibly stressful. And for kids whose brains are still developing, that kind of stress can have a huge impact.
Mm-hmm.
It's like their prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain, responsible for planning, decision-making,
Yeah.
and keeping those emotions in check, is under constant pressure.
Okay. So that's the science. But what does this actually look like?
Right.
I remember this fascinating study the book talks about with rats
Yeah.
and electric shocks.
Oh, yeah.
They gave some rats a wheel to
Mm.
spin to stop the
Yeah.
shocks, while others had no way to escape.
Right, and the crazy thing is, even the rats who had a fake wheel,
Oh, yeah.
one that didn't actually stop the shocks,
Mm.
were less stressed than those who had no control at all.
Right.
Just the illusion of control made a difference.
So even if they couldn't actually change the situation, just feeling like they had some power over it
Exactly.
helped them cope. That's wild.
It's like pressing that elevator button, even though you know it won't make it come any faster.
Yeah.
We crave that sense of agency, that ability to influence our environment. And for kids, it's even more important because their world is largely controlled by adults.
Which makes total sense when you think about it. If you're a kid and you feel like you have no say in anything, constantly being told what to do, where to go, what to wear, I can see how that would be incredibly frustrating.
Absolutely. And the problem is,
Mm.
in our efforts to protect and guide our kids,
Yeah.
we sometimes unintentionally take away their sense of control. We try to smooth out all the bumps in the road, solve all their problems, make all the decisions for them. And while we're doing it with the best intentions, it can actually backfire.
But instead of constantly jumping in to fix things,
Mm.
how can we help kids build that sense of control?
That's where this idea from the inside out
Hmm.
of fostering self-driven kids comes in.
Okay.
Instead of controlling them, we need to help them develop self-control. And this doesn't mean letting them run wild.
Yeah.
It's about finding that sweet spot
Yeah.
between guidance and autonomy, between structure and freedom.
That's where the self-driven child really shines. It gives it some really practical strategies to help kids develop that inner compass. One that really stuck with me
Yeah.
is what they call the "it's your call, but not crazy" principle.
It's such a simple but powerful idea, right?
I love that.
Essentially, it's about giving kids choices whenever possible. Within reasonable limits, of course.
Yeah.
This could be something as basic as letting them choose their outfit for the day, or deciding what they want for dinner, from a pre-approved list, of course.
I can already hear some parents out there saying, but what if my kid makes terrible choices?
Right.
Like what if they choose to wear pajamas to school
Right.
or eat nothing but cookies for dinner?
And that's where the but not crazy part comes in. It's about setting those boundaries,
Mm.
creating a framework where kids can make decisions
Yeah.
without veering into chaos.
So it's like, it's your call if you want to wear the dinosaur costume to the grocery store.
Exactly.
And maybe leave the roaring and tail trashing at home. Something like that.
Yeah. And even when those not crazy boundaries are tested, it's a great opportunity to talk about consequences. Like, hey, you chose to stay up late playing video games, and now you're tired for school. What do you think you could do differently next time?
It's not about punishing them for making the wrong choice.
Exactly.
It's about helping them learn from it and make better choices next time.
It's about guiding them towards making thoughtful decisions rather than dictating every aspect of their lives.
So it's your call is all about giving kids some control
Oh,
over their everyday choices.
yeah.
But what about those bigger, more internal motivators? Like how can we help them find that spark that makes them want to learn, to explore, to try new things?
That brings us to another key concept from the book Nurturing Intrinsic Motivation.
Okay.
This is about helping kids find joy and satisfaction in the activities themselves, rather than relying on external rewards or punishments.
I'm a big believer in that. I remember growing up, I got so focused on getting good grades and pleasing my parents that I kind of lost sight of the actual learning part. It became all about the external validation.
It's not the internal satisfaction. It's easy to fall into that trap, especially in a culture that often emphasizes achievement over genuine learning. But think about it. When was the last time you were totally engrossed in something, completely lost track of time? Maybe you were working on a creative project, playing a musical instrument, or even just reading a really good book.
I love those moments.
Exactly.
It's like you're in a flow state, completely absorbed in the activity itself.
And that's what we want to cultivate in our kids. We want them to experience that joy of learning, that feeling of accomplishment that comes from mastering a new skill or tackling a challenge.
The book has this really cool example of a teenager named Sebastian who struggled in school but was totally passionate about working with the rescue squad. He'd stay up all night helping people in emergencies, but couldn't muster that same drive for his homework.
It highlights how motivation isn't this generic, one-size-fits-all thing.
Right.
Sebastian wasn't lazy or incapable. He just hadn't found that spark, that thing that ignited his passion.
So how do we help kids find their Sebastian thing? That activity that makes them want to go the extra mile.
Yeah.
To push themselves to truly engage.
It's not about forcing them into specific activities. It's about providing opportunities for exploration.
Yeah.
Exposing them to a variety of experiences, and then paying attention to what lights them up.
Okay.
What activities do they gravitate towards? What do they talk about with excitement? Where do they seem to lose themselves in the moment?
And sometimes those passions might surprise us. It might not be the traditional academic pursuit, but something completely unexpected.
Exactly.
Like building robots, learning to code, or writing fantasy novels.
Those unconventional passions can be just as valuable, if not more so, than those that are more traditionally recognized.
So it's about embracing their individuality.
Absolutely.
And letting their passions lead the way, even if those paths seem a little off the beaten track.
Now, speaking of things that can lead kids off the beaten track, there's another biggie we need to talk about: technology. This one's a challenge for even the most tech-savvy parents.
Oh, I know this one all too well. It feels like there's a new app, a new game, a new social media platform popping up every day. And kids are often way ahead of us.
That's right.
When it comes to navigating this digital world.
And while technology has its benefits, we can't ignore the potential downsides. We've all heard those horror stories about kids getting totally sucked into video games, spending hours on social media, neglecting their schoolwork, their sleep, their real-life relationships.
The book has this one story that's pretty extreme.
Yeah.
But it really drives home the point. This young man spent 4 years in his basement playing World of Warcraft.
It's definitely a cautionary tale, but it's important to remember that technology itself isn't the villain. The key is teaching kids how to use it responsibly, how to be in control, rather than letting it control them.
So how do we do that? I mean, it feels like a losing battle sometimes.
Well, the book suggests a few strategies. First, it's about setting clear limits, not just on the amount of time they spend on devices, but also on the types of content they're consuming.
And this is where those it's your call principles come in handy again, right?
Exactly.
We can involve our kids in creating those tech boundaries, have conversations about responsible technology use, maybe even collaborate on a tech contract.
Make it a family affair rather than a dictatorship. And of course, we have to walk the walk ourselves. If we're constantly glued to our phones, checking email during dinner, scrolling through social media while our kids are trying to talk to us, we're sending a pretty mixed message.
Modeling those healthy tech habits ourselves is key. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already. Giving kids choices, nurturing their internal motivation, and tackling the tech beast. But what about those mental tools that can help them navigate the ups and downs of life? I mean, let's face it, being a kid today is tough. There's so much pressure to succeed.
That's so true.
To fit in, to be perfect.
And that's where building those mental resilience muscles comes in. The book dives into some really practical strategies that can help kids feel more in control, even when faced with challenges.
I'm all ears. What kind of mental ninja skills are we talking about here?
Well, things like Plan B thinking,
Yeah.
reframing problems, managing test anxiety. These are skills that can help them bounce back from setbacks, approach challenges with a positive attitude, and ultimately feel more confident in their ability to handle whatever life throws their way.
So it's about equipping them with those internal tools to navigate the inevitable bumps in the road. Like, instead of freaking out when they get a bad grade, they can think, okay, this didn't go as planned, but what can I learn from this?
Exactly.
What's my plan B?
And it's not just about academic success. These mental strategies can help them in all areas of life, from their relationships with friends and family to their future careers.
There's this inspiring story in the book about a student who learned to reframe her test anxiety as excitement.
Oh.
Instead of dreading the test. She started viewing it as an opportunity to showcase her knowledge.
Yeah.
And prove to herself what she could do.
It's such a simple shift in perspective. It makes a world of difference. And it highlights the power of our thoughts and beliefs in shaping our experiences.
And that's something we can teach our kids. We can talk to them about these concepts, model these behaviors ourselves, and create a supportive environment where it's okay to struggle.
Absolutely.
And learn from mistakes.
We can be their coaches, their cheerleaders, their partners in building those mental resilience muscles.
And speaking of supporting kids who face unique challenges, what about those who have learning differences?
That's such an important question, and the book addresses this specifically. Talking about raising kids with learning disabilities like ADHD or ASD, it makes a really compelling argument that a sense of control is even more crucial.
Why is that?
Well, think about it. For these kids often feel like they're constantly struggling, like they're not measuring up. They might get negative feedback from teachers, peers, even their own families. And that can really erode their self-esteem and motivation.
So giving them a sense of agency, a feeling of control over their own lives.
Exactly.
Can be incredibly empowering for them.
It can help them feel more confident, more capable, more resilient in the face of those challenges.
I remember this story in the book about a boy with ADHD who found a sense of calm and focus through meditation. It wasn't a magic cure, but it gave him a tool to manage his symptoms and feel more in control of his own mind and body.
It's a great example of how finding the right tools and strategies can make a world of difference. And it's about recognizing that traditional approaches might not always work for every child. We need to be flexible, willing to think outside the box, and collaborate with our kids to find what works best for them.
So instead of saying you need to do it this way because that's how it's always been done, we can say let's explore different options together.
Exactly.
Let's figure out what works for you.
And that collaborative approach itself can be incredibly empowering for kids, especially those who feel like they're constantly being told what to do.
It's about shifting from a doing to approach to a doing with approach. And I think that's a great place for us to pause and take a quick breather. We'll be back in a jiffy to continue our deep dive into the self-driven child. All right, we're back and ready to keep unpacking this idea of raising self-driven kids. Before the break, we were talking about the importance of collaborating with kids who have learning differences to find those strategies that really click for them.
And that collaborative spirit is actually something we can apply across the board, no matter what challenges our kids are facing. You know, one thing that really struck me about the self-driven child is that it doesn't shy away from the messier side of parenting.
Okay.
It acknowledges those moments when our kids make choices we don't agree with, those times when we feel like we're losing our grip.
It's so true. I think sometimes we get caught up in this idea that good parenting means having all the answers, preventing our kids from making mistakes, keeping them on this perfectly straight path to success.
Right. But the book reminds us that we can't control our kids' every move. And honestly, we shouldn't want to. I mean, think about it. When have you learned the most in life? Wasn't it often through those times when you messed up, stumbled, had to figure things out on your own?
I remember when I was learning to ride a bike, my dad kept running alongside me, holding onto the seat. And I just couldn't get the hang of it. But the moment he let go, even though I crashed a few times, that's when I actually started to learn.
Exactly. Sometimes we have to let go, even though it's scary. The book has this great anecdote about a parent who was lecturing his daughter about memorizing state capitals. He was all worked up about it, but then he realized, wait a minute, I couldn't name half these states myself.
That's hilarious. It's so easy to get caught up in those shoulds of parenting, those things we think we should be teaching our kids, even if we don't always practice them ourselves.
So it's about taking a step back and asking ourselves, what's really important here? What skills do we want our kids to develop? And often, it's those less tangible qualities, like
Yeah.
resilience, problem-solving, critical thinking,
Yeah.
the ability to learn from mistakes.
Yeah.
Those are the things that will truly serve them well in life, not just knowing the capital of North Dakota.
Absolutely. So how do we cultivate those qualities?
One of the key strategies the book emphasizes is something called radical downtime.
Radical downtime.
What exactly does that mean?
It's about giving kids
Mhm.
and ourselves permission to unplug, to disconnect from the constant barrage of stimulation that we're all bombarded with these days.
Okay.
It's about creating space for boredom, for quiet reflection, for simply being.
You know, I've noticed that with my own kids. It's often in those moments of downtime, when they're not scheduled to the max,
Yeah.
that they come up with the most creative ideas, have those aha moments,
Exactly.
those bursts of inspiration.
And the book talks about how important this kind of unstructured time is for the developing brain. It's when our brains can make those connections, consolidate memories, process emotions, and just recharge. And that's where practices like mindfulness and meditation come in.
Right? Absolutely. The book makes a strong case for incorporating these practices into our daily lives, both for ourselves and our kids. Even just taking a few minutes to focus on our breath, to notice the sensations in our bodies, to be fully present in the moment can have a profound impact on our well-being.
I've tried doing some simple mindfulness exercises with my kids, like focusing on the sounds we hear or the feeling of our feet on the ground. It's amazing how quickly it can shift their energy from frenetic to calm.
It's like hitting the reset button for their brains, and it helps them develop those self-regulation skills that are so crucial for managing stress, navigating difficult emotions, and making thoughtful decisions.
And speaking of things that can help regulate those stress levels, what about sleep? I know this can be a battleground for many parents, especially with teenagers who want to stay up all night.
But the book is very clear about the importance of sleep for healthy brain development and emotional regulation. They cite all this fascinating research about what happens in our brains when we sleep. It's like our brains are working overtime, filing away memories, making connections, clearing out toxins, preparing us for the next day.
So it's not just about resting our bodies.
Exactly.
It's about letting our brains do their essential work.
And a sleep-deprived brain is a stressed-out brain. It's more reactive, less able to think clearly, more prone to those emotional outbursts we all dread.
So how can we help our kids get the sleep they need, especially those who are fighting bedtime every night?
The book suggests a few things.
Okay.
First, consistency is key. Establishing a regular sleep routine, even on weekends, can help regulate their natural sleep-wake cycle.
Yeah.
Then, limiting screen time before bed is crucial. That blue light emitted from devices actually interferes with melatonin production, which is the hormone that helps us fall asleep.
That makes sense. I've noticed that when my kids are on their screens right before bed,
Exactly.
they're much more wired
Yeah.
and takes longer to fall asleep.
And creating a relaxing bedtime environment can also make a difference. Think about things like dimming the lights, reading a book together, taking a warm bath, listening to calming music.
Those all sound so much more inviting than staring at a screen.
Right. And involving kids in the decision-making process can also be helpful. For example, letting them choose their bedtime within a reasonable range or pick out their pajamas can give them a sense of ownership over their sleep habits.
It's like we're giving them those it's your call moments.
Exactly.
But for sleep.
And it's important to remember that sometimes sleep issues might be a sign of something else going on. Anxiety, stress, even underlying medical conditions can disrupt sleep. So if you're concerned about your child's sleep patterns, it's always a good idea to consult with a healthcare professional.
No, we've talked a lot about empowering kids.
Yeah.
And fostering their sense of control. But what about the academic side of things? What about school? I mean, let's be real. School can be a major source of stress.
It can be.
For kids and for parents.
And the book actually takes a pretty critical look at the current educational system. It argues that the intense focus on standardized testing and academic pressure is actually undermining kids' sense of control and motivation.
I can see that. When you're constantly being evaluated, compared to others, and told that your worth is based on your grades, it's easy to feel like you're not good enough.
Yeah.
And that can be incredibly demotivating.
Exactly. The book cites research that shows that excessive homework often backfires, leading to stress, burnout, and a focus on grades over learning. It's like kids are so focused on getting the right answer that they lose sight of the joy of discovery, the satisfaction of mastering a new skill.
It's like they're just going through the motions
Right.
rather than truly engaging with the material.
And the book advocates for a more holistic approach to education,
Hmm.
one that prioritizes creativity, critical thinking, and a love of learning.
I love that. It's about nurturing those curious, inquisitive minds, rather than turning them into test-taking machines.
Exactly. And the book highlights some really innovative programs that are already doing things differently. For example, there's the Quiet Time program,
Oh,
which
yeah.
incorporates meditation into the school day.
I've heard great things about that program. It's amazing how something as simple as taking a few minutes to meditate
It's true.
can have such a profound impact on kids' well-being and academic performance.
And there are schools that are replacing traditional PE classes with fitness training. Recognizing the cognitive benefits of exercise, others are emphasizing the development of a growth mindset, teaching kids that their abilities are not fixed, but can be developed through effort and perseverance.
It's so inspiring to see these schools paving the way
It gives me hope that things are starting to shift.
for a more balanced and enriching educational experience.
Now, we can't talk about sense of control without addressing one of the biggest challenges for parents today: technology.
Oh boy, here we go. It feels like a constant battle to keep up with the latest apps, games, and social media platforms.
It's a lot to navigate, for sure. And the book delves into the science behind technology's impact on the developing brain. And it's not all good news.
We've all heard those concerns about excessive screen time being linked to all sorts of problems,
Right.
from sleep deprivation and anxiety to social isolation and attention issues.
And it's not just the amount of time spent on screens that matters, it's the content they're consuming. The book talks about the potential dangers of violent video games, the negative impact of social media on self-esteem, and the addictive nature of many games and apps that are designed to keep kids hooked.
It's like they're playing on those dopamine reward systems we were
Yes.
talking about earlier, but in a way that can become unhealthy and even addictive.
So how can parents navigate this tech-saturated world and help their kids develop healthy tech habits? Well, the book emphasizes the importance of setting clear limits and boundaries.
And it goes back to that idea of involving kids in the decision-making process, right?
Absolutely. Having open conversations about responsible technology use and creating a family tech contract can help everyone feel more in control. It's not about banning technology altogether, but about finding that balance, that sweet spot where technology enhances their lives rather than dominates them.
And of course, modeling those healthy habits ourselves is crucial.
Absolutely. If we want our kids to put down their phones and engage with the world around them, we need to do the same.
So true. It's that do as I do, not as I say thing. And one of the most powerful messages I took away from The Self-Driven Child is that it's okay for our kids to struggle.
That's such an important point.
In fact, it's essential for their growth and development.
It's in those moments of struggle that they build resilience, learn problem-solving skills, develop that grit and determination that will serve them well in life.
The book encourages us to view challenges as opportunities for learning, to celebrate effort over perfection, and to create a safe and supportive environment where our kids can take risks, make mistakes, and learn from their experiences.
And it reminds us that we don't have to have all the answers. Sometimes the best thing we can do is listen, empathize, and trust that our kids, with the right support, can figure things out for themselves.
That's such a great point. It's about letting go of that need to control everything
Yeah.
and trusting in their ability to navigate those challenges, even if it gets a little messy sometimes.
That's right. And that brings us to one of the book's most intriguing chapters, which focuses on the importance of letting go. It's a topic that can be really challenging for parents, especially those of us who are used to being in control.
I can imagine. It goes against that natural instinct to protect our kids, to shield them from harm, to make sure everything goes smoothly for them.
But the book suggests that one of the best things we can do for our kids is to step back and let them navigate their own lives, even if it means they'll make some mistakes along the way.
It's about trusting their abilities, respecting their autonomy, and believing that they are capable of making their own choices.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that sometimes our attempts to control actually backfire, leading to power struggles and resentment. The more we try to control them, the more they might resist.
It's that classic teenage rebellion thing. But I guess it starts much younger than that, right?
Absolutely.
That need for autonomy, that desire to assert their independence.
So it's about finding that balance between providing guidance and support while also giving them the space to explore, to experiment, to make their own mistakes and learn from them.
It's about embracing the messy, unpredictable nature of parenting and to find joy in the journey, even when it's not always smooth sailing.
Right. And remembering that our role is not to mold our kids into perfect versions of ourselves, but to support them in becoming the best versions of themselves.
Which brings us to one of the most powerful tools the book offers, the idea of reframing.
Reframing. Tell me more about that.
It's about shifting our perspective, changing the way we think about a situation, a problem, or even our own role as parents. The book is this great example of a parent who was constantly battling with her child about homework.
I can relate to that.
It was a nightly struggle,
Homework battles are the worst.
filled with stress and resentment on both sides.
So how did this parent reframe the situation?
Well, instead of thinking, I need to make my child do their homework, she shifted her mindset to, I need to help my child develop the skills and motivation to manage their own work. And that subtle shift made a huge difference. It took the pressure off, opened up a space for collaboration, and ultimately led to a more positive and productive dynamic.
Wow, that's powerful. It's about empowering the child rather than controlling them.
Exactly. And it's a skill that can benefit us
Yeah.
in all areas of our lives, not just parenting. When we can reframe those challenging situations, we can find new solutions, reduce stress, and create a more positive and productive environment for everyone.
Now, we've talked a lot about supporting our kids in developing a sense of control, but what about ourselves?
Yeah.
As parents, we're often so focused on our children that
Yeah.
we neglect our own well-being.
Oh, that's so true. It's easy to get caught up in the demands of parenting. The carpools, the homework, the extracurricular activities, the endless to-do lists that we forget to take care of ourselves.
And the book really emphasizes the importance of self-care for parents. It reminds us that we can't pour from an empty cup if we're constantly stressed, exhausted, and overwhelmed. It's going to be much harder to be the calm, supportive presence our kids need.
It's like when you're on an airplane
Yeah.
and they tell you to put on your own oxygen mask
Exactly.
before helping others. You can't help anyone if you're gasping for air yourself.
So the book encourages us to prioritize our own mental and physical health, to find activities that bring us joy, and to make time for relaxation and connection.
It's about giving ourselves permission to recharge,
Yeah.
to refuel, to do those things that make us feel happy and whole.
And it reminds us that taking care of ourselves is not selfish, it's essential.
Because when we're feeling grounded and centered, we're better equipped to handle the challenges of parenting and to create a more peaceful and harmonious family environment.
You know, one of the things I appreciate most about The Self-Driven Child is its emphasis on the long game of parenting. It's not about quick fixes or instant results. It's about nurturing the skills and qualities that will serve our kids well throughout their lives.
It's about trusting the process. There will be ups and downs, challenges and triumphs. But ultimately, we're in this for the long haul.
Yeah.
And that long-term perspective can be really helpful
Oh, absolutely.
when we're feeling overwhelmed by those day-to-day struggles.
And the journey itself, with all its messiness and imperfections, is where the real learning and growth happen.
Well said. And on that note, I think this is a good point for us to shift gears and start wrapping up our deep dive into the self-driven child.
Sounds good to me. I'm
Yeah.
excited to share some final takeaways and leave our listeners with some food for thought.
All right, we're back for the final stretch of our deep dive into the self-driven child. And, through all these conversations about choices and motivation and resilience, it's got me thinking about how we define success for our kids. What does it really mean for them to thrive in life?
That's a great question. And I think The Self-Driven Child offers a really refreshing perspective on this. It talks about how we often get caught up
Yeah.
in those traditional markers of success, like grades, test scores, college admissions. But what if those aren't the only paths
Right.
to a fulfilling and meaningful life?
It's like we've got this one-size-fits-all definition of success. But what if there are alternate routes,
Exactly.
different ways to thrive that might not fit that traditional mold?
The book calls them alternate routes, and it shares some really inspiring stories of individuals who found success by forging their own paths.
Oh.
One that stuck with me was about a guy named Peter. Academically, he struggled, he bounced around to different schools, didn't really connect with the traditional classroom setting.
So not exactly the poster child for straight A's and Ivy League dreams.
Nope, not at all. But Peter had this passion for cooking. It was something that truly lit him up. So, after graduating from a small liberal arts college, he decided to ditch the traditional career path and follow his heart.
Wow.
He started working as a cook in a restaurant.
So he went for it, even though it probably wasn't what his teachers or parents had envisioned for him.
Exactly. And you know what?
Yeah.
It paid off. He worked his way up in the restaurant industry, eventually landing a management position with a startup restaurant chain. And when the company went public, he became incredibly successful, both professionally and financially.
That's such a great example of how following your passion, even if it leads you off the beaten path, can lead to unexpected success. And it challenges that assumption that there's only one right way to achieve it.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of being open to different possibilities, both for ourselves and our kids.
Yeah.
What if we encourage them to explore a wider range of options, to discover their unique strengths and talents, and then to pursue those passions, even if they lead them off the well-worn path?
What if we help them define success on their own terms?
Rather than imposing our own definitions on them.
And it's not just about careers either. The book also talks about the relationship between money, career, and happiness. We often equate success with wealth, but the research actually shows that once you have enough money to meet your basic needs and live comfortably, having more money doesn't necessarily make you happier.
So it's not about chasing that bigger paycheck, that fancier car, that bigger house.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
True happiness comes from finding work that is meaningful and fulfilling, work that aligns with our values and allows us to make a positive contribution to the world.
That makes a lot of sense. If you're stuck in a job you hate, even if it pays well, it's going to be hard to feel truly happy and fulfilled.
Exactly. And I think that's a really valuable message for kids to hear. It's not about chasing the money. It's about finding that thing that lights you up, that gives you a sense of purpose. And that brings us back to the heart of this whole conversation. Fostering a sense of control in our kids when they feel empowered to make their own choices, to pursue their passions, to define success on their own terms. They're more likely to find that sense of purpose and fulfillment.
Beautifully said.
That leads to true happiness.
I think you've perfectly captured the essence of the self-driven child. It's not about controlling our kids, it's about empowering them. It's about giving them the tools and support they need to navigate this complex world, to find their own paths, and to thrive in their own unique ways.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I feel like I've learned so much, not just about parenting, but about myself too. And before we wrap up, I wanted to circle back to something you said earlier about those alternate routes to success. It really got me thinking. If those traditional measures of success aren't the only path to a thriving life, how do we define it? What does it truly mean to thrive?
That's such a profound question.
Both for our kids and for ourselves.
And I don't think there's a single right answer. It's something we each need to define for ourselves. But I think it starts with identifying our values. Those things that are truly important to us, what brings us joy, what makes us feel fulfilled, how do we want to contribute to the world?
It's about finding that sense of purpose and meaning that goes beyond external validation, beyond those traditional markers of success.
It's about living a life that feels authentic and aligned with who we are at our core.
This has been a fantastic deep dive. I hope our listeners have found it as insightful and thought-provoking as I have. And I encourage you to keep exploring these ideas. What does it mean for you and your family to thrive? What are those alternate routes you might want to explore?
It's an ongoing journey, and we're all in this together.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.